I've met a lot of expats, but I haven't met many who are quite as mobile as Karen Ricks and her family. Every time I check in with Karen, she's in a different part of the world. At the time of this recording, she was in North Macedonia with her husband and son, and they were, as always, preparing for their next move. But it hasn't always been this way. The California native wasn't even considering a life abroad, but her husband's interest in a professional opportunity led to their move to Japan. A stint that was supposed to last 1 year ended up stretching into a decade. But since then, the family has truly embraced the term nomad, and they've crisscrossed the planet twice. Karen explains how she founded a school abroad, made the decision to give it up, and travel the world full-time. She also breaks down the nuances of homeschooling, world schooling, and unschooling your child. And she shares how her multiracial family has been received in the various communities they have lived in. Karen is doing this expat life thing completely different from a lot of others, and you'll learn about it all in this episode of The Global Chatter. Hey Karen, how are you?
Unbelievable. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm doing really, really well. I'm so excited to catch up with you. You are one of our, there's a couple of you that I say are some of our OG expats. Some of our folks who've been part of the Black expat community for a really long time. And for those who don't know, you have written some pieces over the years, and I'm just so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure for me to catch up with you and the other amazing Black expats in the community.
Aww. So, with that happy introduction, I would love for you to just tell people, first of all, where in the world are you right now?
Well, right now, my family and I are located in the city of Ohrid. We are on the shores of Lake Ohrid in North Macedonia.
Oh my goodness, North Macedonia.
Yes.
And for people who, okay, and so here's the thing. My geography is pretty good, but you might need a breakdown for folks. Where is North Macedonia?
We are in the Balkans in Eastern Europe. We are directly north of Greece, east of Albania.
Wow. How long have you been there?
Actually, we haven't been here very long, just a few weeks. I mentioned Albania specifically because that's where my family and I were beforehand. And I always go through the geography lesson for Albania because prior to landing in that country for the first time, my family and I were in Italy. So everybody usually knows how easy it is to find the boot of Italy in Europe. So on the heel of that boot is the Adriatic Sea, and Albania is located directly opposite the heel of Italy's boot.
Oh my goodness.
Lake Ohrid is right on the eastern border of Albania and the western border of North Macedonia. So these beautiful bodies of water, the Adriatic Sea and this beautiful clear Lake Ohrid, have been the waters that my family and I have been admiring for the last year plus.
And so I think if anyone just even hears just that description, they should already know that you guys are pretty highly mobile. And so
Yes.
I know that there's some folks that are just meeting you and learning about your story for the first time. So would you go ahead and just even share a little bit of your international story and your background and how you and your family even got abroad initially?
Sure. Well, I usually start back in 2007, which is when my husband and I left the United States to travel to Japan. And it was originally planned to be a very short-term deal. It was going to be 1 year, and then we were going to return back to our quote-unquote normal lives in the United States.
Of course.
God had other ideas. We loved the experience so much that 1 year turned into a decade. Our
wow.
son was born in Japan. Yeah, a little longer than we anticipated.
Yeah.
Our son was born in Japan. I founded our own international Montessori school in Japan. And then in 2016, we shut it all down. We basically sold 99% of everything we own, and
Wow.
we took our show on the road. I took off to cooking school in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was such a major move to go from the United States to Japan. But we did it. We made it work, and it was more than we had ever imagined it could be. And then we had this other major, major move from Japan to Italy. And at that point, my husband and I kind of reassessed what we were doing, and we realized that picking up and moving again, especially after having become such minimalists and selling off most of everything that we own, was actually not going to be that hard. And so we went to the UK for a little while. We spent half a year in Mexico, and we realized that we could literally continue to do that indefinitely. And so we've been traveling almost 4 years full time now. We have lived on 4 different continents. I want to say that North Macedonia makes 10 or 11 different countries. And we are absolutely loving this nomadic world schooling lifestyle that we're living.
Let me jump in there because I'm so curious. What was the initial catalyst that even took you to Japan? So what was it that made you both say, hey, we want to go to Japan for a year?
It's funny that you ask, because my husband was in love with the idea of working in Japan, teaching in Japan, traveling around Japan. And initially I was not. I was so reticent, in fact, that between the time he first brought up the idea and the time we were actually in country was, I want to say, like 4 years.
Okay. So it took a while. Wow.
It took a while for me to come around. But he convinced me. He was really excited by the idea. He was also recruited by the largest English language school in the nation at that time to come to Japan to teach. So I followed him. I was just gonna, play tourist and be a housewife. And I was just kind of along for the ride. And he was enjoying the work that he was doing so much. And I ended up making amazing friends with a lot of other teachers in Japan, not just English language teachers, but teachers across the spectrum. And having, worked with, talked with, counseled, and advised a lot of different teachers, parents began asking me to teach. I ended up working with a good Japanese friend, teaching like little mommy and me classes in local community centers in our city. And as the children of those parents got older and became school age, the parents themselves asked me, you said, my child has to go to school now, but I still want them to study with you, to learn with you. When are you going to open your school? So that was how I ended up founding our International Montessori School.
And you obviously mentioned that your husband was being recruited by this institution to come and teach. So did both of you come from an education background in the U.S., or did both of you have different careers and transitioned into education?
I have always been an educator. It was something that I was doing for many, many years before we ever even considered leaving the United States, which is where my husband and I were born and raised.
Yeah.
My husband was really interested in teaching specifically in Japan. And so he began studying education specifically in order to do that. It's not what he has always done, but he has always been in that teaching and kind of coaching role himself, having also worked in martial arts and as a personal trainer. So he had that teaching experience, just not necessarily in the classroom.
Yeah.
And
okay.
so that during that time that we spend in Japan, he continued to study and learn, even getting his own Montessori certification, so that, eventually we all were working together in our school.
And I mean, let's be honest, it's not every day that you hear people move to a country and eventually open up a school. And so
Right. What
was the experience of opening up an educational institution in Japan? What was that like? And what was the real motivation behind that?
Well, as I said, I've always been an educator, and I come from a family of teachers. So I had literally been in discussion with the director of the school at which I'd been teaching in the United States about expanding that school and beginning an infant toddler program at that Montessori school. So the fact that I ended up doing that was not a surprise. It was the fact that it happened while we were in Japan that was really outside of my comfort zone. And the fact that we did it as soon as we did too. I'd always thought that, of course, I would love to have my own school. I would love to, be able to work with my child. But we opened the doors to our school when our son was just 4 months old. And that was years earlier than I had ever anticipated doing so. And it was our decision, obviously, but that decision the timeline was sped up by the massive Tohoku earthquakes and tsunamis back in 2011. You remember that?
Yep. I mean, how could you miss it? But yeah.
So yes, major upheaval, so much in transition. And we had been discussing the possibility of opening our school and making plans to do so. And then suddenly here is this major national disaster, and foreign residents of Japan were fleeing the country like rats off of a sinking ship. Yeah. And we were really at the point where we needed to make a statement to our community, this community in which we had become pillars, letting people know that this is our home. This is where we intend to stay. And so the establishment of our business, while again, a little bit earlier than we had initially anticipated, was perfectly timed to really inspire the confidence of the parents who entrusted us with their children.
And were the students coming predominantly from the Japanese greater community, or was it also expats, or was it a mix? Where did your student body and families come from?
It was all of the above. We had students that had 2 Japanese parents. We had several students that had 1 Japanese parent and 1 foreign resident. We had students who had 2 foreign resident parents. Our community was really a mix of parents and staff and families from all over the world.
And I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, just so we can drill it down. Where specifically in Japan were you guys?
So our school, our community was in Nagano Prefecture, which is located in the geographic center of the country. We're about 3 hours outside of Tokyo.
Okay. And so it seems like you have this vibrant community. You obviously were in Japan for a long time. You initially were thinking it was going to be a year. You stay more than a year and open up a whole school. What was sort of the decision then to leave that? Especially in a community that you were growing in and obviously you loved. What was sort of the catalyst that had you guys decide to know what? Maybe it's time for us to head out.
It was honestly such a hard decision. As you said, this was a community that we loved. This was, our son's hometown. The school it was almost like another child, such an integral part of our family, our day-to-day life. But what happened was one summer, I had a friend reach out to share this incredible opportunity with me about this amazing cooking school in Italy. And, I was up
Wait a minute,
perusing.
pause. Did you say
Yes.
cooking school in Italy?
Cooking school in Italy. Yes, that's exactly what I said.
I've been to Italy. You said cook, which makes my mind go food, which makes, of course, Italy. Anyway, so amazing cooking school in Italy. Say more.
Yeah. So I was, perusing the website, and we were on summer vacation from our school, and it was probably like, I don't know, midnight, 1:00 in the morning. And I remember just thinking, oh, that would be nice. Maybe one of these days, what if? And for whatever reason, my brain got stuck on that what if, and I literally did not take more than 30 seconds to think about it before I dashed off a quick note to the school just to say, hey, my name is Karen and this is what I've been doing for the last decade. And I'd love to know more about your school. And I really sent this little letter off into the ether and didn't think much of it. But when I got a reply back and a request for an interview, and when I talked with the owner of the school and really just began to get excited about the possibilities, it was really something that the excitement that it inspired in my child was what set this light bulb off in my head. And what I saw was his incredible enthusiasm about this adventure. And I realized that letting that opportunity pass by would probably be one of those things that I would regret for the rest of my life. Okay. And I know having, just a lifetime of filled with amazing opportunities. We grow and we change in so many different ways. But each time, each progression, there's some change, that we have to make. And there's some kind of pain or obstacle that we have to overcome. And, there's this pain sometimes of, making these hard changes in our lives. It was incredibly painful. There were a lot of changes that my husband and I had to overcome moving from the United States to Japan. And it was painful, but it was really empowering and enlightening and educational and inspiring. And it was a lot of really exciting growth. And then there's the pain of regret. There's the wondering, what if I had taken this other path in life or something like that. And watching my son light up at the idea of traveling to Italy. And this was, he was 5 years old at the time we're having this conversation. So he hadn't been on an airplane yet. He had traveled around Japan with us a bit, but he had never been on an airplane before. He had literally, born and raised in Japan. He didn't know what life was like on other continents in other countries. And I realized that at that moment, the pain of regret of not taking advantage of this incredible once in a lifetime kind of opportunity would be so much more than the pain of undergoing this very dramatic change that we were going to have to undertake as a family to pick up and leave our home of 10 years to, let go of this business that was like, another baby. And like I said, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we decided we just could not pass that up.
So give us a little context. So this opportunity in Italy, what was it? What would you be doing? What kind of training would you receive? And even where in Italy did you go?
Okay, so the school is in Sicily, which is the southernmost island off of the tip of the Italian boot, off of the toe.
Yeah.
So, and we were in this teeny tiny little town south of Palermo, which is one of the major coastal cities in Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a cooking school like no other. It's not like the traditional culinary schools where, people are chopping and roasting and making sauces and, doing tests on how to make this, that, and the other thing. The school is really focused on helping to explore and understand the versatility and the sustainability of culinary traditions, not only in Sicily and throughout Italy, but in the region, and a study of sustainable agricultural and food practices literally all over the world.
Wow.
And it was years ago, and yet there are times when it feels like yesterday, because there are parts of it, parts of that experience that I'm still working to wrap my brain around.
And how long were you in this community? How long were you at the school?
3 months.
Okay. And so I'm kind of interested in unpacking that because, and as you gave the really great introduction and talking about this, so your family has left Japan, which they've been for and been living in for a decade. Your son is at this point about 5, maybe turning 6. Is that about?
He was 6 years old just before we moved. Yeah.
And then, I'm curious as parents who are raising a child who was in Japan, what was the transition you think for him going from the country that he's known to this new space where it's different, right? Italy is different and Sicily is different from where you were. Yeah. How do you think he sort of navigated that at such a young age?
Well, I think part of what made it so exciting for all of us as a family is that the things that we were learning, the things that we needed to do to make that transition were really not so different from the things that we had been teaching our child and all the children who came through our school all along. As a truly international school, having an international community within the 4 walls of this brick and mortar building, we had been doing things like studying languages, like looking at geography and the similarities and differences between cultural dress and practices. And so it wasn't like that part was really a stretch. It was we literally made a game out of studying Italian, which was a new language for all of us as a family. I talk about Duolingo as an incredible language learning resource, and we had fun with the kind of gamification aspect of it, seeing who could get the most points in a day and who remembered the most vocabulary or who could score the most points on a review or whatever, but it was fun. And
did you, and let me ask this question, just because you were talking about learning Italian, was your son and were you guys fluent in Japanese previously?
I will say fluency is more of a spectrum than kind of a fixed point. And so while the language in our home has always been English, we were all communicative and operating freely in Japanese within the community. So yes,
so
I would have called us a multilingual family before we, even my husband and I, having studied Spanish before leaving the United States, we had some experience with languages, but living in a place where the community language was entirely different, that was a brand new experience. And the challenges of learning Japanese as a community language far outstripped the challenges of learning Italian as a
Italian, right?
community language.
Especially when you had Spanish as at least somewhat of a reference point.
Exactly. I literally, many of our Japanese friends expressed concern about the difficulties we would have, knowing that we didn't have a background in Italian. And I just laughed because if I had to rank on a scale of difficulty, going from English to Japanese or going from Japanese to Italian, the Japanese was way more challenging. I mean, we're talking completely different grammar structure,
right?
3 different syllabary, not even a sort of alphabet that I could read and comprehend and understand, but 3 different new ones to learn. Not even a comparison.
And I think for a reference point, I didn't mention this earlier, but you're originally from California, correct?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. So I think for the folks who are Americans, always kind of cool to hear where people kind of left and where they went to. And so I think even knowing the Spanish, right? And what part were you San Diego? Was that you?
I was in San Diego, yes. And so I was traveling internationally across the Mexican border before I ever needed a passport to do so.
Yeah. And I'm actually prouder that I remember where everyone's from when I go, was that country you? Is that state you?
No, I'm impressed.
And so, I could definitely vouch, for me, French is the other language that I grew up in the community hearing. And so you're right. When I went to South America, okay, fine. I hadn't really studied Spanish. I hadn't studied Portuguese, but I could understand significant amounts of what people were saying. And actually what was, I think, harder was I didn't know the words in Spanish or Portuguese, and I'd say it in French and everyone would look at me because I think on the spectrum of Romance languages, French is the one is the more complicated, but like Italian and Spanish and Portuguese are very close to each other. But you're right. That could be so helpful, especially when you're trying to navigate, I guess at that point, really like your 4th language. Right?
Yes.
If you think about it based on your own language history. Mm-hmm. And so, all right, so you're in Sicily, which is not something we hear every day. And there's a lot of things about your story that we don't hear every day. Right, and you're in Sicily, and what was so this program was 3 months. Mm-hmm. What did you sort of envision was going to be your next step after that? Or was this this is a new adventure, let's see how it plays out when it's done kind of mode?
Well, actually, as we were discussing, this big move from Japan to Italy, I started looking for other teaching opportunities in Italy. And we traveled with the idea that perhaps we would find something there. And there was one particular opportunity that I was pursuing that fell through while I was still at the school, and another that opened up in an entirely different place. So that was when my husband and I really got to talking about the fact that we didn't have to just move and then stay anchored in one location for a year or a decade, like, we had originally planned or hadn't planned for Japan. But that having already sold most of our stuff and, traveling relatively lightly, we could pick up and move from one country to another as, opportunities arose, as our curiosity encouraged. And that's essentially what we've been doing for the last 4 years.
All right. And when we come back from our break, we're going to start talking about this idea of world schooling and this concept that honestly I learned having talked to you. And we're going to do a deep dive on what it's like to find community and faith and all of that while you're abroad. So let me hit stop. So for the people who know you, Karen, a lot of folks know you from Our Kitchen Classroom. And there are two things I want to talk about. I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about world schooling. And so let's actually back it up a little bit. You have done, once again, as I referenced earlier, a couple pieces for us, and one of them was on world schooling. And I will say,
yes,
even though it was written a while ago, we still get people who hop up on the site, and that's one of the most popular things to read about is world schooling. And
Yay.
and one of my thoughts behind it is, of course, families in general who are thinking about going abroad and are looking at their educational options. But the other thing, quite frankly, is, and we are both American, is as we see a nation that's got a lot going on right now, and there's a lot socially and politically and economically, I think folks are really expanding the way they want to approach educating their children, and really just even expanding the way, the kind of lives they want to live. And so I would love for you to introduce, for the people who don't know, what world schooling is. Like, I had an idea, I just didn't know the name for it, and I've heard different names for it, but I'd love for you as a practitioner of world schooling to tell the people, what is world schooling?
What is world schooling? Yes. Well, I'm actually one of those people, like you said, who had kind of stumbled into this concept and was really living it before I had a name for what it was. But the way that we as a family define world schooling is literally learning from everyone we meet, every place we go, and every activity in which we are engaged. Quite literally, the world is our classroom. And when I talk about categorizing our sort of educational style as a family, it really breaks down into sort of a few different broader areas. A lot of people would put us in the homeschooling category. And that means something very different in 2020 than it has, I think, for most of what we talk about as, our educational history. But for the purposes of what we're discussing here, homeschooling is, really when the families are taking charge of that educational journey for themselves, for their children. And that is classified as being in the home, but in most cases, it doesn't mean that we're homebodies or that we're homebound. We're really living and moving and working and learning within our communities. So that's really of crucial importance. But even more broadly than that, we as a family kind of fall into what we call the unschooling category. And for homeschoolers, or when people are first considering stepping outside of a traditional school education and moving it to the home, to the family's realm of responsibility, a lot of people first think about recreating school at home. So you might have a designated space, a desk, a classroom in the home. You might have a schedule that looks a lot like a school schedule and separated by different subject matter areas and things like that. You might have textbooks and maps on the walls and things like that. For us, unschooling is kind of the polar opposite of that. We live as if school doesn't exist. And what that looks like for us is following those things about which we are most passionate down these drastic rabbit holes of research and exploration and study. And it is the most wildly free way of not just learning, but of living our lives.
So I wonder, why was this the method that you decided to go? Was it in part of the fact that you guys became highly mobile, or was it you decided to go this way in terms of educating your child and then became highly mobile?
It's interesting because the pushback really that I got from a lot of friends and families when we embarked on this journey looked a lot more like, what? Are you crazy? What are you thinking? And I say that mostly to reassure parents who are, maybe rethinking their children's, their family's educational journey, that it's not such a crazy thing. But as, as an educator, as a teacher who is passionate about learning, who has, been doing this for so long and coming from a family of teachers, stepping outside the classroom was really a very radical thing. But I think the reason for that is because for so long, the assumption has been that if children are not in school, or if they're not in some sort of a structured learning environment, then they will not learn. And that has been exactly the opposite of my experience, both remembering my own childhood and all of the things that were important to me that I learned that had nothing to do with school. And my experience as a professional educator now for almost 25 years, and just watching children, as human beings, we are innately, insatiably curious. We have this passion to know, to figure out, to understand what's happening in the world around us, to connect with people, to explore, to understand. And I mean, you can't turn that off. You can't stop that without trying really, really hard.
Right.
And so the opportunity that we faced as a family when we walked away from the school that we had founded, that we were, really working in for years. It was a process that literally turned, all of our expectations inside out. And so we did this thing that's known as deschooling. And for anyone who is considering embarking on a different educational path, I highly, highly recommend it. It's basically taking time to step away from everything that looks like work or study or education and just kind of take a step back, to take a breath, to evaluate your thought processes around, what learning, what education looks like, what it can look like, and what you want it to look like for you and for your family. And our process of deschooling really started when we landed in Italy, and everything that we were doing was suddenly so different from the way that we had lived for so long. My son grew up in our international Montessori school in Japan. He was crawling around the classroom or, engaged in lessons on my hip in a sling. And we were together like all day, every day, eventually as a family, 12, 14 hours a day in school. And then suddenly I'm the one off going to school, and my husband and my son are, at home, and I'm coming home from school at the end of the day, excited to share all this neat stuff that I'm learning. And, my son is giving me a tour around our tiny little community and introducing me to, the children he's met on the playground or whatever. Our lives were just so different. There wasn't a thought of, okay, well, he has to go to school, or, he has to sit down and do this workbook, or, whatever.
Yeah.
We're literally figuring things out day to day as we go.
So, I could hear a parent listening in and going, okay, so then what does a quote unquote typical day then look like? As someone, because I'm sure you get that question, right? As someone who, especially if you've had your kids in a more traditional schooling format, there's always that question I can see from a parent going, okay, so what do they do? so what do
you do all day? Yes. Well, and this is why I always caution parents that deschooling can't just happen over like spring break or Christmas break or even summer vacation. For those old school parents like me, for whom, an American summer vacation was 3 months long. And it was like this long, leisurely period of sleeping in and watching TV and playing video games and, playing in the park, whatever. That kind of stuff is great. But I almost feel like I have to encourage parents to settle in and have that vacation and then begin the deschooling journey after that. Because what's so challenging about stepping outside of the educational conventions is not, what you actually are doing from day to day. It's more along the lines of what you're not doing. And the challenge that we often have as adults is justifying to ourselves why it's okay that we're not doing what everyone else is doing. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh. You know what? And I know we're talking about world schooling and deschooling, but I feel like this is being re-examined right now in the world of remote work.
Yes.
Because we're
so many
of us, if you were in many ways privileged to be able to work from home, you start to realize, okay, I go to the office from 9 to 5, but what does it look like if you do get your work done, if you're able to do it, and it's done from like 7 to 12, right? Because it's still the same amount of work, but it looks different. And so, I can absolutely see kind of that you almost have to reframe your perspective and reframe your mind in terms of what the possibilities are.
And that's what the process of deschooling really allows you to do, to give yourself both the time and space to really sit back and think, okay, well, if I'm not doing this, then, what am I going to do to fill this time? And really just to sit with the discomfort of figuring out, am I okay with that? Do I have the sense of clarity within myself to be able to justify that, not only to myself, but to other people who, might question how I'm spending my days.
Right.
And that is really, really uncomfortable for a lot of parents to sit with. And that's why that process of deschooling takes more than just a traditional school break to kind of figure out.
Gotcha. Nah, man, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you really do have to mentally get into that space because there's so much, I think there's just so much about the way we perceive the world and we perceive how things could be that anytime we run up against something that's a little bit different or sort of outside that box, we kind of look at it and go, but how do you learn if you're not in a classroom with 24 other children and a teacher and, break time and how do they prepare? And so that can be difficult because we all have to unlearn, right? If we're going to do this method, we have to we have to unlearn what we learned and use what's beneficial, right? But what wasn't beneficial, we kind of have to admit and say it wasn't helpful. And it doesn't.
That's exactly.
And it doesn't contribute.
That is absolutely true. And this process of evaluation requires really kind of peeling back lots of layers. The layers of our expectations based on what our experiences were as a child.
Oh, totally.
The layers of expectations of, friends and well-meaning family members that get piled on top of that. And then as a parent, this is what I think my child is going to need. And all of these things get piled on top of one another. And so it takes time to peel back those layers and start to figure out, first, just who am I as an individual outside of this role of student or parent or child or teacher or whatever other roles we might inhabit. Who am I? What do I like to do? What gets me excited to wake up in the morning? And, learning styles. Oh, that's another one that takes some time, both as a parent and a teacher and from the perspective of the child too. What ways get me most excited about learning? This idea that sitting at a desk with an open, textbook and or notebook, or even sitting in front of a computer screen, that doesn't necessarily resonate with everyone. And I know, especially in 2020, these are the sorts of things that we're all having to really take some time to work through and to figure out, how are we going to make this work? And what ways can we design our days to make it work so that it's not this painful, torturous experience for everyone involved?
And so it's crazy because you really have to think about, even looking at your own journey in terms of really doing that reflection, even, embarking on the expat life, right? And embarking on some kind of mobile life requires some of that, because you still have pushback from family and friends who might say, well, you're from here. Why do you want to go to this other country? Why do you want to upend your life? Right. So you've already, in many ways, you've probably already gone through level one when you made that jump moving to Japan. And
absolutely,
because I think that's the story of almost any expat, right? Because for everyone who is supportive and kind of sort of gets it, there's a whole host of people who don't. Right? Because
there absolutely are.
You are doing something that's completely different. And the thing that I think I've picked up the most, and what I've learned from you with world schooling and deschooling and unschooling, is that in many ways, let's be honest, this is like choose your own adventure. So, so I've been saying that a lot for a lot of different things. It's like choose your own apocalypse with everything going on. But also, this is like choose your own. What weapon will you use in the Super Mario Brothers game? I'm dating myself. Like the Legend of Zelda. It's like, what weapon are you going to?
I was in those two, yes.
but it is sort of like choose your own adventure in the sense that even what world schooling looks like for your family, right?
Yes.
Does not mean it's going to look the same for a different family.
Not even close.
The important part is what you're doing a good fit and a good match. And I think that's the part I really want people to hear, that it's not what you're doing. You can only speak about your experience because it makes sense for your experience. But
exactly,
for other parents who have children with different learning needs, or, just even more children, how you deliver this world schooling experience is just going to depend on what is the best fit for your family and your situation. I would imagine
that's it. Yeah. Exactly. And to get back to one of my favorite subjects of food, when I use food as an analogy for this experience, people tend to have a little bit greater understanding because they realize, oh, well, that's something that we all kind of do in a variety of different ways. And it's okay to customize it, right? We might all decide, oh yeah, we're going to have burgers today, but not everybody's burger is going to necessarily look the same either. You might have a patty in the middle of two buns, and that might be kind of standard, but that doesn't mean that everybody's patty in the middle is going to be filled with meat.
Right.
Necessarily, does it? Or, somebody might have lettuce and cheese and tomato on there, but they might put that in a completely different order. Or they might decide, I'm just going to have that as a salad on the side. And so I'm still eating all the same things, but it looks very different when it's compiled on the plate.
Absolutely. And
if we can all do that, take the same meal and kind of, customize it to the way that we like to enjoy it, we can take that same image and say, well, our entire life is really, that same way as well. We wake up and we go about doing the things that we're interested in doing, but it's definitely not going to look the same, even if there are some of the same components there. And we might season it differently. We might eat it at a different time of day. The entire composition of it is going to be so drastically different from one person to the next, from one household to the next, from one country or one continent to the next, that even our world schooling experience as a family changes with each continent that we move to, with each new country in which we live, in each new community language that we're taking on in this journey. Every single aspect of it changes, and it's variable. And that's part of the excitement and the joy of the experience, which is why I always laugh when people ask what a typical day looks like, because there is no such thing as a typical day.
And that's a great segue into your work with Our Kitchen Classroom. And could you tell me a little bit more about what you cover and what you do with that?
Sure. Well, I like to say that Our Kitchen Classroom really grew out of our international Montessori school in Japan, because just like I was talking about challenging those expectations of what something should look like, from the moment we opened the doors to our school and I explained to the parents that we would be preparing food in the school, there was this pushback about, well, okay, but that's not what the education is supposed to look like. But we have always used food and cooking as a sort of a gateway, if you will, into a variety of other subjects. The traditional classroom subjects, you might have them separated with history and math and reading. But everything comes together in the kitchen, whether it's reading recipes, weighing, measuring, and calculating percentages for ingredients that are coming together. You've got the beautiful chemistry and the science experiments of cooking itself. And there's the art of composing a dish, a meal, a series of dinners and the events in which everything comes together. And then, of course, there is the language of food and the multi-sensory experience of touching and smelling and tasting all of the different ingredients at every stage, from sourcing the ingredients, wandering out into the local community and bartering for ingredients in a local market, all the way to washing up the dishes and cleaning up and putting everything away after it. Everything is all part of this learning experience. And so I was doing this with children under the age of 6 at our school in Japan. And that's exactly what I continue to do, both in person and especially online, with parents and families all around the globe. And we get a chance to not just talk about the different ingredients and dishes from around the world that we're preparing, but some of the, historical and cultural traditions that have continued to perpetuate these foods and how people experience those around the world.
I mean, I will say this just as someone who's read some of your writings, and once again, we've had them on the site. There's so much I think I learn even about food, just even in the stuff that you share and your experiences and what you've gained, that you're right. I mean, food is such a connector, right? And
yes.
And sometimes when you don't have language and sometimes you don't have a shared experience, there's something about seeing an ingredient that maybe you might be familiar with, but seeing it prepared in a different way and learning about an identity and how that ingredient is used in a community. And so obviously you had spent your time in Italy as a family. And then I believe at that point you guys made a transition over to the Balkans. Is that correct?
Actually, from Italy, we spent some time in the UK.
Oh, I forgot
Mexico.
About that. I don't know why. I forgot about the UK. I know you guys would, but my brain is like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, they've been in Albania this whole time. Okay, so you went to the UK and you went to Mexico.
We did actually. We've spent a lot of time in the Balkans, but the first 2 years of our full-time travel, we actually completely circled the globe. We returned to where we started in Japan and had a chance to visit with friends again, as I, was really excited to bring so many of the things that I had learned cooking in these different places around the world back to the place where it, kind of all started. But from Japan, again, we went to Australia and New Zealand. We went back to the United States briefly to visit family and friends again. We made a second tour in Italy, this time in the Tuscan region, where I was helping to run a restaurant.
I love Tuscany. Side note, this has nothing to do with anybody, but I love Florence and Siena and Assisi, and like if I could retire, y'all, if you have not been, it's gorgeous and peaceful and the food's amazing. But anyway, carry on.
Oh, yes. No. You can continue to gush about Italy. It will always have a very special place in my heart and in our global culinary adventures. I feel like Italy is one of those places that we could return to again and again in, different times of the year and different seasons and different regions of the country. And, you uncover, you learn, you discover something new. And that's one of the key things that was so revelatory for me in this cooking school as an adult, this understanding that I didn't have as a child growing up in Southern California, that, food has seasons.
Right.
I did not know how blessed I was to have fresh fruits and vegetables, basically whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, showing up, on my table. And
but Karen,
it's ironic.
I was going to say, Karen,
the first time that came to my attention was when we had a Japanese exchange student who came to stay with my family when I was a child, who thought we were rich. We had to be a wealthy family because we had this bowl of fruit in the middle of our kitchen table.
But Karen, I was thinking that's such an American thing, though.
Yes, it is.
I don't think if you really haven't lived outside of the U.S., you actually recognize accessibility to whatever you want, irrespective of whether it is being grown at that time, is ridiculous. Because in most places in the world, right, you eat what's in season. So it's
absolutely ridiculous. And I will say that there are a few other places in the world where we've traveled and we've had that accessibility. So that is a privilege of wealth as well as location.
Yes.
But it's also really, really crucial to an understanding of just how interconnected our planet is. And part of the reason for that disconnect is exactly what we're trying to draw attention back to, because the fact that, we would even live that way really, when we take the time to think about it, especially if you've had the opportunity to live in a place that is so connected to the earth and its seasons that is not the case, that you realize just how far separated we really are from, so much of the way many people around the world live and experience their daily life.
Agreed. I mean, it is crazy to me. Every now and then I have this thought. I'll go to the store and I'm like, I know this is not in season. It's also why it's expensive, but it's not as expensive as if I were in another country where they totally don't have access to this piece of fruit or vegetable, and they've got to ship it in, and it's got to go long distances. I mean, I felt like I learned that living in Qatar, right? Is that there were a lot of things were not indigenous to, because it was the desert. A lot of things were not indigenous to the region. And so, and we'd always have this conversation, food is so expensive. Well, yeah, because especially if you wanted a particular Western thing. And that's if it was processed, but let's even get into whole grains and fresh fruits or whatever, and it just doesn't grow there. And it is funny to me how often we don't think about that until we are in different places. And so you're right. We're so interconnected.
Yes. I know, especially coming from the American context that says, I want what I want when I want it.
Right.
And having the convenience of that is one of those privileges that we often don't recognize until we don't have it anymore, or when we have to pay for it.
Yes.
And I remember how many foreign residents in Japan would complain about how expensive it was to get XYZ. Well, of course, shipping that whatever snack food that you love from halfway around the world, yes, that's going to cost some money. But it extends to more than just the snacky kind of stuff too. I mean, for years, as a cook and as an educator and as a person who just wanted to connect, I was a part of a more limited subset of the expat community in Japan, because we would host this big Thanksgiving dinner. Mm-hmm. And I say a smaller subset because we, by necessity, had to limit it to people from North America or their extended families who had that connection to the Thanksgiving traditions that we had shared, simply because of the fact that we couldn't have this become, an event with 500 people. Mm-hmm. We were limited in scope and size by the space that we had available. But there were years when, I would spend $60 to ship a single turkey.
Yeah.
To Japan.
I was going to say, turkeys are expensive if you're not in a place where they grow them, like they raise them. And that's
turkeys are not a thing in Japan.
And there are a lot of places in the world that don't raise turkeys. I'm just saying.
No, that is absolutely correct. And that's why it was so important to, discuss the culinary traditions behind, what we called this cultural tradition. Mm-hmm. And sharing the fact that, all of these different pieces didn't necessarily originate in this one place, but the way that it all came together, and then reevaluating, well, how can we make adjustments to that in order to, bring it more locally? And so eventually this big Thanksgiving dinner thing that we were doing, we, rather than shipping turkey from the United States, we could get something from Brazil maybe, or, we got to know local farmers. And eventually we created enough of a demand. I had local farmers who were growing pumpkins. And it was absolutely amazing.
Now, what time of year you need well, let me not say that. I will rock a pumpkin and sweet potato pie just about any time of year if I have the pumpkin or the sweet potato. But yeah.
Yes.
But you never think about
yes.
It's funny though how much we do associate a food with a certain holiday or an experience. And so for some of us,
we absolutely do.
If that food is not there. So if a turkey is not there, it's not really Thanksgiving for a lot of people. And yeah. I personally have witnessed how much people have spent to get a turkey to a country that does not have turkey.
And I have been one of those people too. But
yeah.
An amazing part of this journey is, again, coming to that self-awareness, that sense of clarity that says, this is how I choose to define myself, or I no longer choose to define myself and, my cultural experience in this way. And so here we are, my family and I in North Macedonia, mm-hmm. and recognizing, my culinary background, our hosts, the people from whom we're renting our place now, are farmers. Yeah. And so they have grown this amazing pumpkin. So I've got this huge pumpkin literally sitting on my kitchen counter right now that we're going to turn into a pie to share with our neighbors, our Macedonian neighbors. And, it's fall, but it's not November yet. And that's okay, because this is a part of how we share a little bit of our culinary traditions and our cultural experience, and part of what we learn as we all come together in this exchange. And that's what makes this travel and meeting new people and learning together such an amazing world schooling experience.
And so I think you've described community and community in a very unique, tangible way, which kind of leads me to sort of these next line of questions. And so, mm-hmm. as a family that is, you're not constantly on the road, but you guys are changing locations quite a bit. How have you guys navigated community? And I know we haven't referenced this earlier, but you're an interracial marriage, and
Yes.
what has been for you as you've navigated 4 continents, you lived in different countries, you lived in places where a lot of people wouldn't even consider going. How have you found community, and how has the reception been? Because I know that's often a common question for some of the families that are in interracial cross-cultural relationships is, has it been okay? Has it been chill? Have there been challenges? And of course, you guys have a son who's biracial. What's been your experiences as a family?
Our experiences have been amazingly warm and welcoming everywhere we go. And I know it's not necessarily everyone's experience, but it's a huge part of the reason that we are still so excited to be on this adventure together as a family. I can honestly say that outside of, London, maybe, or when we were in LA, being a multiracial family is still not necessarily the norm or the expectation everywhere we travel. And, my husband and I are quite used to the shock and surprise on people's faces when, we identify ourselves as a couple. But I have to say, it's really, really funny when, as a family, the 3 of us will be walking down the street, usually with our son, racing ahead of us. And with his big, full head of spiral curls and his long eyelashes and high cheekbones, he always gets, this reception as people, are cooing at him and oohing and awing and wanting to touch his hair. And it's hilarious for me to kind of see that light bulb moment of understanding when people look at him and then people look at my husband, they look at me, and the genetic mathematical equation finally clicks in their brain and they're like, oh.
Y'all ain't the first ones to say that too. Where people go, yeah, people look at our children and then they sometimes point and go, the 2 of you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really, really funny. And I have to say, it was even funnier when we actually connected with another multiracial family in Albania. And all of us went walking down the street together. A black man and a black woman, a white man and a white woman, and all these multiracial children. And there was so much shock and awe and confusion. I know that people think I must be exaggerating, but I have literally been the very first Black person that many people have ever seen,
I believe it.
Actually in person.
I believe it.
Not on television or not in a movie or anything.
I believe it.
And I have had people, practically walk into walls, bump into things, trip because they're so busy, staring and trying not to appear that they're staring.
Right? God bless the people who are trying to appear that they're not staring, because then there's the other contingent where they're just staring. And
yes, and sometimes they do flat out stare. But what has been wonderful to me, coming from the American context that I had growing up as a child, is that the curiosity is not animosity. The people have just been interested and innocently curious because they don't know. They're approaching me without the racial hatred or bias or discrimination, with which I was raised. And from that context, it has been incredibly refreshing because yes, I stand out. I have my naturally curly afro and, my dark skin and my, big, wide, round body. And I look different from everybody else around me. So people are naturally curious, but they legitimately want to get to know me, and they want to, touch my hair and touch my skin and ask if the black rubs off and some of the things that, make me laugh.
I'm like, people are still asking, and yet, I was going to say, did I make this up? Did I see a photo of you once doing a handstand?
Oh, yes.
You? Okay.
Yes,
I thought you were doing something. I said, wait, and I was scrolling through, and I was like, is Karen doing a handstand in the middle of wherever she is, somewhere in Europe? And yeah.
I do that all over the place, yeah. I practiced yoga, and I did some tumbling and gymnastics with my son.
That's inspired that memory.
Out in the middle of a street. I know I took a picture in a mural, in front of a mural once, someplace that said, change your perspective.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
I love that you said curiosity is not animosity.
Yes.
Which makes me think about the fact that you guys have a son, and your son's, the majority of his life has been spent outside of the United States. And so, I'm sure he's entering at this point probably his preteen years, if he isn't in them already.
He is almost 10.
Yeah, I knew he was getting up there. And so what do you think as you guys are raising this child, how do you see his relationship with the U.S. right now? And what do you think it might turn into as he gets older, as a teenager?
Well, again, especially this year in 2020, that's so incredibly complicated. My husband and I have recognized so much of how his childhood experience and my childhood experience are so vastly different from our son's experience that a lot of his education, his upbringing is really, in a lot of ways, not just broader in, the global and traveling sense, but in the true sense of being a global citizen. And that's really what we want for him. We don't want his thinking, his perspectives, even, his language to be limited by, these imaginary borders, these lines that we've drawn on the map, on the globe that, dictate that a person who comes from here must, look like this, do that, say or express or whatever. We want to really open up his sense of self, and by extrapolation, his opportunities, even wider than what we personally experienced ourselves. And so for us, that is what world schooling is really about. And we were just talking about community. And we have found community not just in the physical locations in which we have resided, not even just in the online communities that we are a part of and that continue to grow in these world schooling spaces with other traveling families like ours, with other families who, educate in a less traditional sense like we do, but also within communities of faith. And this is something that has happened within our church families in Japan, where our son was born and spent the first few years of his life, but everywhere around the world that we have been. And what we have been attempting to highlight as we make those connections is just how similar we are all as people, and helping to make those connections, helping to satisfy people's curiosity by getting to know them on a personal level, cooking together and breaking bread together as we do. It really helps the world to be a much smaller place, so that the end result, we hope, what we're working toward is that our child really feels at home anywhere in the world, that we happen to reside. And, I would hope that that might be in the United States, if that's what he chooses at some point in the future. In Japan, if that's where he would like to return, in Albania, where we have spent the last year. It could be in some place that we have yet to visit, that, we haven't considered living yet as a family. Albania was never on our radar when we started traveling. And now it's one of the many places that, we have been blessed to call home. So that's what we want, for our child, to really be a true global citizen and to know that he can be at home anywhere in the world, and to give him the skills, the self-confidence, the sense of self to make that a reality.
Well, I think you've just given us some really powerful thoughts to really reflect on. And much of what you said, I think that's the hope of all parents, right? Is to have these children that can have a sense of the world and a sense of place and a purpose. And I love what you say about community and the different ways that we can find community. Because I think too often community doesn't necessarily look like us, but it doesn't mean
it doesn't always. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it can't be our community.
Exactly.
And with that, I'm gonna pivot and drop you into the lightning round, because I give all guests all warning. I've got 3 questions that I'd love to close on, and so sort of the stuff I say what give me the response that comes off the top of your mind, and then usually there's a 2-minute soliloquy about how I'll just answer. Is it quite the right answer? So
I can't promise you I'm not going to overthink it or answer in a completely different way than you expect, but bring it on.
Honestly, you wouldn't be the first. So, all right. So, first question, best country experience so far?
Oh, gosh.
Right? That's the first response normally, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. I'm working so hard on being present. And, I talked at the beginning about the beautiful, sparkling, crystal clear Lake Ohrid. So I have to say right here, right now, where I am in Lake Ohrid, because it's magnificent.
And I would bet it is a place that few of our listeners have been to.
Well, I can highly, highly recommend it.
Cool. So we got to put North Macedonia on the travel list. All right. When the borders open up. Second question. What's the easiest dish to make while on the road?
The easiest dish to make while on the road. I am going to have to say eggs. And I would have said that even while I was still living in the United States, because eggs are such a versatile ingredient. But what's amazing to me is that not only are they versatile, but they can be changed and enhanced and elevated so drastically differently, depending on what's in season, what's available, wherever we happen to be living, that we love playing with eggs everywhere we go. And it's something that we do with regularity. So yeah, I'm going to go with eggs.
Okay. And if I change that question up and put non-dairy vegan option, what would you say?
Non-dairy vegan option. Breads around the world are so much fun to play with too. And we have done so many different kinds of flatbreads and yeasted breads. And so we did tons of sourdough while we were in lockdown in Albania.
I do love me a good flatbread, I will say. Great flatbread. Oh, man.
Yes. And because you talked about using a variety of different grains and things too, using rice flour or whole wheat flour or, just a variety of different freshly milled grains. We had access to some really great ones in Albania too. So yeah, I like playing with bread.
Last question. If you had to retire somewhere, what's at the top of the list right now?
See, I know you're going to think I'm just talking about where I am because it's gorgeous, but growing up in Southern California, I love being near the water. And Orid is kind of this, resort community. And if I could retire right here and be close and go play in the water like I have been like every day since I arrived here.
There. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I've also said that about every coastal city where we've lived. When we were in Mexico and, we were a stone's throw from the beach, I was like, yes, I just want to stay here for the rest of my life. And when we were in Australia and we were on the beach and in New Zealand and on the beach. Yeah. So if I have to say retire, I'm thinking, there's white sand and blue water and a lot of warmth and sunshine. But I have such itchy feet. Even the thought of retirement doesn't fill me with this desire to be rooted necessarily in one specific place. So maybe I'll just do as I did when our family started our travels, and I will chase summer and warm weather around the globe and keep moving. And I'll just hit up all of the crystal clear white sand beaches I can find.
Great answer. Great answer. Well, before we close out,
what can I say? I want it all.
I was going to say, before we close out, where can folks find you? I know that you do coaching and consulting with families, and you've got a lot of projects going on. So where can you be found on the interwebs?
I do. The best place to catch up with us is at our website. That's ourkitchenclassroom.com. And you can search for me that way using my name, Karen M. Ricks. And I have my personal and business pages on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us with the hashtag ourkitchenclassroom. We've got a YouTube channel where you'll find not just cooking lessons, but also some little snippets of our global culinary adventures and even some of the splashing waves from the beach.
Nice.
But yeah, we're just search for Our Kitchen Classroom, and hopefully you'll see my smiling face and some good-looking food and warm, sunny beaches.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for hopping on with me today, Karen. I always love hearing your stories.
Thank you for having me.
And your adventures.
I love chatting with you.
I always learn something new, which I don't necessarily all the time, but with you, it's always something that I'm thinking, I haven't even considered that before. And so I'm so glad you're here.
Yes. And my job is done. That's what I aim to do.
All right. And with that, we're done.
The Global Chatter from the Black Expat is hosted by me, Amanda Bates. It is executive produced by Justin Williams. You can find all episodes of The Global Chatter on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcast.